For any of you guys who don't know Dan, Dan was actually one of the first people at River Valley I met when I became a part of River Valley over 10 years ago now. Dan was working with youth ministry back then, and that's what he's still doing. That's where his heart is at, and I think forever probably will be. So really excited to hear what Dan has for us this morning, and even just, as our church has kind of grown and we've become, kind of a multi-campus church where, we have our campus out here in Murphy and Redwood and now Rogue River. There's a really important part of that, which is as we believe God has called us to reach our communities. One of the main ways that we connect with people is, through youth and through the schools and especially like out here in Murphy, and we're seeing that in Rogue River too with some of the new stuff going on. Is that it's just such a good way to demonstrate God's love to the community is by starting in the schools and serving the kids and the teachers. And so as Dan's role has kind of grown, he really almost our youth program is a citywide youth program. And so, just super excited to have him out here and looking forward to what you got to say.
All right, we'll see. Thanks, Brian. Well, good morning, Murphy. That's good. I like we're interaction today, because I'm the kind of guy who I'm going to move a lot and I'll talk a lot, and we'll just do it all together as a family. So actually, I was thinking about that, how cool it has been in student ministry. I've worked in student ministry for over 20 years here in Grants Pass. And your leadership team here at Murphy, it's been cool to watch. I mean, Tim Sorensen was a scrawny 8th grader when I started working with our student ministry, and got a walk with him and him on our staff. Allie Berg, she was a student in our ministry, a staff person with me. Super cool to see her taking a role out here. I mean, Brian and I did ministry, like you said, a long time ago. And hey, did you guys know it was Brian's birthday yesterday? Happy birthday, Brian. So, oh, sorry. Hey, you're just kind of coming up with where I'm at in age, so it's okay. But I got to serve with he and his wife, Ashley, in our high school ministry for years. I mean, Joe right now is like Brian said, kind of hitting us out at Rogue River, and also just get to be part of us in the team. But I really am excited. Yeah, students are great, and communication and connection with students is my passion, and I hope that we're going to see that today as we continue on in this God Space series. Actually, this room, it's really cool to be back in a totally different setting, because I've made so many entrances awkwardly into this cafeteria as I've come and done campus ministry out here at Lincoln Savage at all of our middle schools and high schools in our area. But walking in to these cafeterias and sitting down with kids that some you knew, some you didn't, and you have to figure out a way to make connections. How do you communicate? How do you start a conversation? So some really awkward times in here. And then I think about like the field and in my late 20s, reliving my glory days. You're up there playing football at intramurals, and I just really wanted to throw it as far as I could just to kind of, just show off. I'm just going to be honest. Just try to throw it as far. Just go for long bomb and see how many kids can run, and then just throw it past them. Or on the courts over here, really trying hard to swat a middle schooler, because for whatever reason, that was going to make me have some joy in my life for that day. But the best was getting to go into the gym and playing dodgeball. And getting those kids who've won, they just want to hit you because you're the big target, but then throwing it way too hard and then realizing the next day that I shouldn't have done that. But all in all, it's this idea of making connections. And sometimes it takes throwing a football. Sometimes it takes sitting at a table. Sometimes it's over coffee. Sometimes it's with your neighbors. But how do we make connections with people? How do we make those interactions meaningful? And where do we go from there? So you guys, hopefully as you've gone through this God Space series, and hopefully most of you are taking the time to read the book, or you're in life group to kind of debrief it. But as we look at this, how are we challenged to maybe go deeper in our interactions with others? How do we actually look at the people in our lives? Do we notice them? Do we notice people that we are in relationship with, or do we notice people that we aren't yet in a relationship with? And how do we make those conversations count? And I think about that for me. I'll tell you, like, this is not easy. Like, it's not easy to just go, oh yeah, I'll make great spiritual conversations with every person I meet. And I think back to even Tyler's, one of his first messages in this series, and he sat there and he reminded me as a pastor, my job is to share the gospel, right? That should be what it is. And it might be easy to come up here for me to share here, but I struggle just as much in the one-on-one time and making the natural friendships I have go to that spiritual level. And I know for me, that challenge, it's not just about the people in the pews that need to be out doing outreach and sharing their faith, but it should be me. Am I intentional in how I connect with those who are not yet followers of Christ? So I think this whole idea of making conversations go to a spiritual level, it can be hard. And I don't know, I'll be honest, I'm not a reader. So I was really happy when Mark gave us this book that it was small. And not only small, but it's pretty easy to read, and it's very practical. Just so you know, I'm more of a Dr. Seuss type reader. Like, that's like one fish, two fish, red fish. That's my level. I got that. So as I was thinking, our series, today is this idea of wonder. And I came across this quote in Oh, the Place You'll Go, and it's this, that think and wonder and think. That's about my level. Like I get the think part. Yeah, think. Okay, think. Wonder. What do we wonder about? What does that word wonder even mean? And so I actually, go to the place that we all go as teachers, to Merriam-Webster, to find out what is wonder. A feeling of surprise mingled with admiration, caused by something beautiful, unexpected, unfamiliar, or inexplicable. Awe, admiration, fascination, surprise, astonishment, amazement. It's a desire or to be curious to know something. So that's wonder. And if you really want to think about wonder or see a natural display of wonder, where do you go? You go and you look at children. You look at kids. Kids are full of wonder. They get it. Right? They look at the whole world through the eyes of excitement and experience. And they're just so excited about every single thing they get to experience for the first time. It's this idea of innocence and purity and curiosity all bound up into one little thing. And if you're a parent or you've been a parent, you remember that time when all that curiosity and wonder came out in question after question after question after question. We could go forever, right? Because that's where they're doing. They're asking questions to fill that space of wonder in their lives. They're so curious. And for whatever reason, like, the cool thing is that at that point, parents, something. And so, like, they ask you questions because you know everything at that age. And so you get those fun questions that kids ask. You remember, like, the questions like, why is the sky blue? And the sky's blue because blue's the best color. So I'm just going to tell you that's why God made, sky's blue. But think about some other questions. I found some fun ones, real questions by real kids. How hard do I have to jump so I don't come back down? It's a good question. How did people make the first tools if they didn't have any tools? Why do flies think gross stuff smells good and good stuff smells gross? Why do I have two eyes if I only see one thing? What is light made out of? If that's the river front, where's the river's back? And that last one actually was for my son when he was like 4 years old. If that's the riverfront, where's the river's back? Questions, right? Kids ask lots of questions. Like, surveys have been said to figure out, moms have been asked like 288 questions on average a day. 208 questions. What do you think, Ashley, at least? And the most, 4-year-old girls, up to 390 questions a day. I think you're living it, right? Yeah, exactly. But they want that information. They're a sponge. They want it all. And they come to you. Be excited that they come to you. Because as children, they come, when they become middle schoolers and high schoolers, then you don't know anything. Like, you don't know anything. And then, for whatever reason, we transition into adulthood and we lose our sense of wonder. We begin to, move away from that excitement and awe, and we want things that are concrete. We want things that make sense. We're not as curious as we once were. Do we really think at our relationships and our professions and our finances and life in general, and we want them to all make sense, to all fit in a little box, and we don't look at things through the eyes of curiosity? I wonder if we look at that word wonder and we confuse it with the word worry. That instead of wondering about things, we actually worry about them, right? I wonder what my future will hold. But are really we just worried about what's next? I wonder, will I get to retire, or am I just worried about my finances? I wonder what my kids will become, or am I just worried that they will survive or that they will struggle? I wonder, or do I worry? So today, as we journey together, I hope we can look at this idea like, let's rekindle this sense of wonder. And our big idea is this, that are we a people who wonder with purpose and wondering our ways into spiritual conversations? As I was preparing this message, I came across this quote by Albert Einstein. And actually, it was in the 1955 Life magazine, and actually was the magazine right after he had passed away. And they did this article, and a man took his son, who was a college student, to go and glean some information from Albert Einstein. That'd be a cool place to go. And this is what Albert says to this young college student. He said this: the important thing is to not stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existence. One cannot help to be in awe when he contemplates the mysteries of eternity, of life, the marvelous structure of reality. It is enough if one tries merely to comprehend a little of this mystery each day. I love that. The important thing is to not stop questioning. Curiosity, wonder. Do we do that? Are we going to look at that idea of wonder and make it to we wonder into spiritual conversations? So if you look at your notes, you can see, I'm a youth guy, so we're going to look at the word wonder. Wonder, and it's in each of the letters will have a point today. But do we wonder with purpose? We're going to be looking at a passage in Luke 24 to kind of walk us through this idea of wonder. We're going to kind of follow some examples of Jesus, right? I mean, he is a great person to glean from when it comes to anything, when we're looking at our lives and our lives, especially when it comes to spiritual things, but how he wondered with purpose. And we're going to look at this in Luke 24, and to kind of give you a little context of where we're at in the story is Jesus has been on the earth for his 33 years, right? He had his 3 years of his mission to share with the world per se then, and he's been accused, he's been actually, considered guilty. He's been put on a cross. He's died. He's been put in a tomb for 3 days, and he's risen again. And that's where we pick up the story in Luke chapter 24. We're going to start at verse 13. Now the same day, the day that he had risen, it says that two of them were going to the village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. And as they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still and their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" "What things?" he asked. Stop right there. So we see Jesus wonder with purpose. He wonders with these two guys on the road to Emmaus. And the W in our notes today is the who, what, when, where, how, and why, right? As every good teacher should teach that. The 5 W's and the H, right? He asks some questions. He begins the wondering process with these two guys walking on the road. And he says, "What are you guys discussing together as you walk along?" Or verse 19, what things? He clarifies. He wants the what and the what. He gets them to a place of wonder, right? So I think these 5 W's and the H, the who, the what, the when, the where, the how, or the why and the how, they're great when we're trying to gather information. Like that's the whole point of those questions. They're done in journalism or in research, in police investigations. It's to get the complete story on the subject, to get the ball rolling, right? What is it about? What happened? Where did it take place? Where is it going to go from here? Why did it happen? How did it happen? Those things that we begin to ask to start conversation, to get the conversation going, and to keep the conversation going. And I think that's what we get to see in Jesus. He starts the conversation with these two guys walking along. Right? He notices them, and then he's curious about them, and that's why he asks these questions. He wants to know what they're discussing. If you think of this, the Gospels have the life of Jesus, right, in these 4 books. And do we know how many questions, does anyone know how many questions Jesus asked in the Gospels? No guesses? Any guesses? More than 100? More than 200? More than 300? I did not do the research on it. I found someone way smarter than I was. 339 is about how many questions are in the Gospels that Jesus asks. Now, they're all 4 accounts of his life, so a lot of them could be duplicates. But Jesus knew how to ask questions, and he asked a lot of them. So if we follow his example, we should be asking questions, noticing and asking, because questions are a great way to engage people. Questions are to help them discover the truth, to come to their own conclusions, to make their own decisions. And Jesus did it. Jesus asked the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, and the how. So are we? Are we asking those questions? And the things that Jesus did is he took initiative, right? He was the one who asked a lot of the questions first. Like on the road, he stops the guys and says, hey, what are you talking about? Pretty simple way to start conversation. But he took initiative, but he also was available when others took initiative to him. When people asked him questions, he was available. He left room in his schedule for interruptions, for the questions to come. He usually met people where they were at, whether it was, at the well or in a tree. And he was interesting in establishing common ground with each person he made the interactions with. And those are things that we can do in our lives as well. To connect with others, to begin the conversation, we ask the questions. The who, the what, the when, the where, the why, and the how. And when we start those questions, and it starts our conversation, questions can also keep a conversation going. And it gets to that second point. And our second point is openness. We need to have openness from both sides in the conversation. So we start to be open as we walk with this person, as we talk with them. We're open about what we're thinking about, but we give them a place for them to be open about what's important to them. We let them wonder out loud when we ask questions. We let them, kind of go through the process of what they are thinking about or what's important to them. And that's what Jesus does in this passage. So we look back at verse 17, he says, well, what are you guys discussing? They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, how are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know what things have happened here in these days? What things? He asked. What's important to you? He asked. About Jesus of Nazareth, they replied, he was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and the rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, on the 3rd day since all this took place, it is the 3rd day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but didn't find his body. They came and told us what they had seen, a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see Jesus. See, we see that they were so concerned about what happened to the Messiah. That was what was important to them, and Jesus asked about it. We see that they're also open about their feelings, right? It says that they were downcast. We're not having a great time. The questions really confronted what their beliefs were, what they were thinking about at that moment. And that's what we can do as well. We can be open to let the people share and be open about what they're going through, what is important, what are they struggling with, or what are they excited about. And as we listen and interact, are we an open and safe place for them to share? Are we going to let them give it all, or are they going to feel like I can't give my whole story? Our openness and our questions need to be coupled along with compassion and kindness. See, not only what questions we ask, but how we ask them, right? We look at a lot of things like our body language, our tone, our eye contact, our touch. All those things make a difference in how questions are received with openness. And Jesus did a great job of how he did this. In Mark 10:21, it says that Jesus looked at him and loved him. Luke 22:61, the Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Mark 1:41 says he was moved with compassion. Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him. Luke 7:13, when the Lord saw her, he felt compassion for her and he said to her, do not weep. See, each of these times, Jesus not only asks or he's engaged in the conversation, but he shows kindness and compassion through his mannerisms and how he actually interacted with the person. Eye contact, body language, touch. Being open. Openness also comes from the idea that you don't have to have every answer. Being okay to say, man, I don't know. Maybe we can figure this out together, and we'll kind of get that a little bit later. So we get the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, and the how. We need to make sure we're open, but in this, we need to make sure that the third point is that we have no agenda. This is not agenda-driven. Now, I know we talk about this purpose of creating, but purpose does not mean agenda. It's not like, well, if I ask these 3 questions, then I've done my job, I can count it off. It's not a quota. It's not that I have to memorize all these things in order so that it all comes down to finally signing on the dotted line. Right? It's not a time for us to get on our soapbox and know, here's all the things I know from A to Z when it comes to the Bible. No, it's the agenda of love, of just openness, of caring, of letting them tell you, like I said before, what's important to them. I'm sure we've all had those times where we've had a person who had a serious agenda when it came to your conversation, where you get the call like, hey, let's meet up for coffee. And you meet for coffee and you realize about a couple minutes in that they only want to tell you about their new business venture. They want to tell you about how you can be a part of this new thing that they're doing and it's going to be a great deal for you. And all they want to do is assign the dotted line. We can't be agenda-driven. We have to be love-driven. We have to go back to the heart piece, right? We have to know that we have the heart of God and the heart for others. This idea of questions and curiosity is more about a place to listen and not a place for you to share. It's the purpose of learning, not the purpose of teaching. It's listening to what's important to them and its desire to learn more about them. You're not trying to get your point across. Because as we are open and as we go into this desire for wonder, we come to point 4, which is discovery, right? We all like to discover things. I really think it'd be really cool to discover buried treasure. I think it'd be awesome. I'm really excited when I discover $1 that's in my pocket, right? Like we like to find things out. And so when you ask questions and when you begin this process of conversation, people can discover on their own. It's a great feeling to go, the aha moment. Good questions invite people to search for their own answers. Good questions can stir the imagination. Good questions make people think. Remember, think and wonder and think. Good questions make people ponder spiritual things, and hopefully good questions make people a little closer to Jesus. See, open-ended question that develops curiosity. It's the idea that, well, I wish I could figure out what that means. Inviting people to ponder, inviting people to contemplate, inviting people to find answers on their own, not just be told what they should believe. On the road to Emmaus, that's what Jesus does. You continue on in verse 26. Jesus asks the question, did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory? These two guys have to ponder that question. Well, yeah, I guess. Well, what? It wasn't just, hey guys, I am the guy. I'm Jesus. I'm the Messiah. No, he's like, well, didn't this have to happen? Leaving questions open-ended, making it not about yes and no, making it about let me have some self-discovery. It's not just here in this passage that Jesus does that. He asks questions like that all the time. Matthew 15:31, why did you doubt? This is when Jesus is talking to Peter as he was trying to walk on the water. Or Matthew 6:27, can any of you by worrying add a single hour to your life? Matthew 6:28, why do you worry about clothes? Doesn't God provide for the flowers? Matthew 16:15, but what about you, he asked, who do you say that I am? Those kind of questions that you have to ponder and figure out for yourself. Who do I say that you are, Jesus? Who are you in my life, personally, individually? Questions to ponder, to lead us to discovery, to make us challenged in our thinking. So all this is to work our way into spiritual conversation, to work our way into naturally having people talk. And if you've read the book, like I said, it's not an agenda, but there's some good helps in here. And if you go to chapter 11, page 107, there's 99 wondering questions. Questions that we can look at that may help us move into these ideas of spiritual conversations. Wondering questions like things about life lessons or careers or world events, good versus evil, love, finding God, right and wrong, the future, major influences, leadership, discipleship, decisions. All those things that maybe having some of those ideas of questions in your back pocket may help us trigger conversation or may help us ask other questions or help the person we're talking with ponder spiritual things. When we wonder like that, though, there's two things that are going to happen. There's going to be risks and there's going to be rewards. The rewards as we help people wonder is that, man, maybe they're going to find out something about themselves they didn't know. That can be a super awesome reward. The problem is the same thing. It can be a risk that they're going to find out something about themselves that they didn't know. Or maybe as we ask questions, we begin to go through that ourselves and we find the risk and the reward going, wow, that's something that I didn't know about myself. Are we willing to go through that journey together with them, to walk with them? Won't be easy, but it's so rewarding. Riskful, or full of risk and reward. Matthew 7:7 says this, ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, the door will be opened. So when we start spiritual conversations, when we help get to this idea of pondering and get to discovery, we hopefully get to the point where others ask and they seek and they knock. And when those things happen, when they ask, they will receive. And when they seek, they will find. And when they knock, the door will be opened. And that's ultimately, yes, where we want to get to, but it comes through walking in this journey together with them. And it's the combination of listening and questioning and listening. And that's the next point is number 5, it's equal questions and listening. In chapter 7, it talks about God's teeter-totter. And as a youth guy, I really wanted to have a big teeter-totter up here and get some people and we were going to play around because that's just what I should do. But we don't. But it's this idea that there has to be this balance. That as you ask a question, you leave some space for listening. And as you listen, you hear what's important that should drive you to ask more questions. It's the back and the forth. It's what Jesus did on these guys on the road to Emmaus, that as he asked questions, he gave them a space to tell him what was important to them. And as he heard what was important, he asked clarifying questions, and he continued on back and forth in the teeter and the totter. Good questions are going to draw things out from the people that you're in conversation with. In Proverbs 20, verse 5, it says, the purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but the one who has insight draws them out. Like, our questions should draw out the purposes of the person's heart that you're in communication with, that you're in conversation with. Are we doing that? Are we listening and then learning and then questioning and then learning and then listening? And it's this ongoing cycle, and it's really, really sweet. And if I don't know if you guys were here last week, or, Brian did a great job on listening, or if you missed his, or you want to listen to more, all the messages are on our new church app. There's a shameless plug to get that, but to go listen back to this idea of listening, because I think it's a skill that we don't use very well. We like to talk a lot, but do we stop and listen? Maybe we do good at questions, but we're just waiting to ask the next question as opposed to listening to what the answers in the conversation are. That's why they used, most of the messages last week used James 1:9. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, right? Quick to listen. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you should listen twice as much as we talk. And as we've gone through this series, and I really have liked the graphic representation of our series, because it reminds me it's the whole body. It's one thing, it's the whole body of the church, right? That we're all this together, but it's also our whole body. There's the heart, and there's the eye, and there's the hands, and there's the ears, and there's the thoughts, and there's the mouth, and it's the whole body working together. And as we go into spiritual conversation, we make God's space with those around us, it has to be the whole body working together. It has to be each part doing its part well, right? We need the heart. We have to know the heart of God, and we have to know that we have a heart for others. We have to notice the people around us, notice the people that we come in contact with. We have to serve, right? We serve to give us the good deeds that leads to the good news. And then we have to listen. We have to hear, and not just hear enough to speak, but to hear and to truly take in what the people are sharing with us. And then we get to this today where we continue to wonder. We ask good questions to move the conversation. And then next week we'll talk about this idea of speaking. What do you say? How do you share the message that God has given you? So as we get to that point of discovery, and we have this equal listening and we have this equal questioning, it all comes down to the final part, which is the R, which is relationship. That as our conversations grow and as the questions that we ask is to build relationship one to another. And then our prayer is that relationship moves them to want to have a relationship with the Almighty God. That it goes from a relationship of friendship that we have to a relationship with the one who gave himself for us. And I love it in this passage as they walk and they talk, these two men and Jesus. When you get to verse 28, as they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he was going farther. But they urged him strongly, stay with us, for it's nearly evening. The day is almost over. So he went in and stayed with them. He builds this relationship with these two guys to the point that they want him in for dinner. Hey, we should hang out more. The conversation, the questions that he asked built friendship, built relationship that led to fellowship. And then as we continue on, it says, when he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They each asked each other, were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and he opened the scriptures to us? They built a relationship with Jesus. They built this friendship with this man they didn't even recognize. And that relationship then, as they realized it was Jesus, then they had this question, were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and he opened the scriptures to us? Think about that. If we are making conversation, if we are asking good questions, or we are going into these spiritual moments with people, do they get to the point that there's a burning within them? They're like, I want what you're talking about. There's something different about you, or there's something that I notice in you. What is that? And these guys said, wow, what did we miss? Our hearts were burning as he shared the scripture, and then he was gone. But for us, as we build relationship with the people that we're in conversations with, it is my prayer, and it's the hope of this whole idea is that they want to have a relationship with the Lord, that they want to come into a personal relationship with Jesus. And next week, we'll look at what does it mean to share what God's done in you so that you can kind of lead them to that place, not agenda-driven, but love-driven, that you want that person that you are friends with and you're in a relationship with, that they come to a relationship with the Lord. Personally, that they come to that personal discovery, that it's important to them. Because there's a lot of things with the people that you're in contact with that they have that's important to them, but is Jesus one of them? So I know for me, it's thinking about the places where I'm at, whether it's a sideline of sporting events, or it's in my neighborhood, or it's with the people at the coffee shop. Each of those people that I come in communication with, that I come in contact with, and I begin to build relationship, do I ultimately want them to have a relationship with the Almighty God? And I hope that's our prayer. I hope that's really where we want to get to, that we wander our way into spiritual conversation. That we continue to get to a point where we have the opportunity to share with others. So would we be those who wonder and think and wonder, and ultimately wonder about the Almighty God? Let's pray.